All right. Can everybody hear me? Let's see here. What you watching there, Savage? We're going to go ahead and get kicked off here in a few minutes. So that I make sure everything's rocking and rolling the way it's supposed to. Ultra, welcome aboard. What's going on, my friend? Alrighty. So, in case anybody hadn't figured this part out yet, I am not generally the most astute streamer. Haven't done this yet. Don't have an intro or any of that fun stuff. And of course, got wonderfully derailed by the fact that Miss Harmony is not feeling so well tonight. So instead, we're going to hop in here. I'm going to let some folks know here in a little bit about what we're doing as far as the actual planned stream, which we'll pick up next week. But I am going to go ahead and give my thoughts on the entire discussion here shortly. And we're going to give it a few minutes here to let some folks roll in, and hopefully everybody can hear me just fine. I'd appreciate if somebody could give me a thumbs up or something in the chat, make sure that I'm coming through good and clear. Prayers for Ginger's recovery. Yeah, I mean that's the terrible part of having to deal with any kind of chronic condition is that sometimes it's an issue. But she reached out to me and let me know she was real sorry about it. And, we'll roll it back next week, and it's a real shame. I was looking forward to it. Did a lot of prep and a lot of preparing to make sure that we had would have a good overall chat tonight. And now I'm out here running Stag, which I mean, talking's what I do for a living, so I guess I can make it work, right? Anyway, drinking tonight, got a little George Dickel 8-year old fashioned. Smoked it with a little cherry wood. And yes, Ginger is definitely fantastic with her picking up her little small kittens. That's definitely something that's close to my heart. My wife and I run Sebastian's House Community Cat Foundation, which is a foundation that raises money to help out mainly feral cats. We feed a lot of feral cat colonies, try and get them in trap, neuter, release, try and get them in vetted up, checked for FIV and all that kind of stuff, and get them released back out to where they can do what they need to do. And then we also end up taking a lot of the kittens and whatnot to rescues and doing a lot of fostering and stuff ourselves. So old Miss Harmony is definitely doing the Lord's work there, and wishing her the best. So we're going to go ahead and get cracking now, talking about the actual subject of tonight's stream. I'm going to go ahead and give my thoughts. I'm not going to go over too much of what Harmony said, because next week when we do the actual stream with me and her, I would really like to make sure that she gets to state her own points and not just what I pull up out of it, what I've got out of the tweets there. But it came from the nerd culture stream, or a nerd culture X thread that was posted. And y'all have to forgive me. I got so thrown off by the fact that looked in and Harmony wasn't going to be with us tonight, and I forgot to upload the screenshots, but I'll make sure I have them there next week so I can just put them up on screen and y'all can read along. But I'm going to go ahead and read out what Jorge Rodriguez had to say on nerd culture. And that's really what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to give my thoughts on that. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it too. We'll pull some information out of the chat, pull some comments there. Yeah, God of Con, nerd culture. Nerd culture is a toxic, lumbering monster that has only contributed to isolate sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, and etc. from the rest of the artistic conversation. And we make those generations go septic and inbred. If we want them to survive, nerd culture needs to die. He further went on to say things like that, Star Wars takes from Kurosawa and Ellen Stein, A Song of Ice and Fire is fantasy, Claudius, even though it's actually War of the Roses. The Daredevil run, best Daredevil run is packed with feudal Japanese and Catholic culture, and these genres, they serve the larger community. But the long and short of it is, Jorge is coming out saying that nerd culture as a whole has become toxic to the actual properties that we like and that we enjoy and we always push. And the thing is, this is a classic case of him being correct, but for the wrong reasons and in the wrong ways. Nerd culture has become pretty self-referential in a lot of ways. And a lot of this, I think, is a defensive overreaction to a lot of what has come in from outside of what we would deem nerd culture. So I guess what we probably need to do first is define some terms. What are we talking about or what am I talking about at least, and what do I think he is talking about when he says nerd culture? When I say nerd culture, what I'm looking at is the overall group, the overall people and climate and the social climate that surrounds anything that would have been traditionally considered nerdy. This is going to be anything. In this case, honestly, I think nerd culture is the wrong word. It's more geek culture. If we're going to use the words properly, a nerd is typically somebody who is very, very astute and is very fanatically, has a fanatic fandom towards something. So, for instance, I'm also a car nerd. I'm a car and racing nerd. I know a lot about engines. I know a lot about how to build them. I know about race cars and race history. Those sort of things you would say I'm a car nerd. I have an obsessive fandom for automobiles and for racing and that sort of thing. And as part of that obsessive fandom, I have a very detailed and in-depth knowledge base on that particular subject. Just like you have a football nerd, we have a lot of those here in Alabama. You could have baseball nerds. Moneyball is a thing. There's a whole movie about it, and it's a real thing. MMA nerds, which both my wife and I could have been considered MMA nerds at one point in time. Geeks, on the other hand, is more what we think of when we say stuff like nerd. That is the socially awkward not counterculture, but outside the culture type stuff. That's when you start getting into focused on like the sci-fi, focused on the fantasy, focused on the space opera, the comic books, video games, and that sort of thing. So really, I think he's talking more about geek culture, because a lot of this is not people who would be really obsessive fans in a lot of ways, or at least not ones with a tremendous amount of knowledge in some cases. But in a lot of cases, it is going to be that. These people who have wrapped up their entire identity in things like Star Wars, Star Trek, Dungeons and Dragons, and that sort of thing. But a lot of them lack that technical expertise and knowledge, because let's face it, everybody on here knows somebody who's a big streamer. Oh man, they're super obsessive D&D fans. And then they go out and say stuff that can be objectively proven false by pulling up Dragon Magazine or pulling up the AD&D handbook or something. We're not going to name any names here, but we all know who we're talking about, and people who use certain kinds of like TP-shaped headgear. So he looks at it. I think that a lot of the problem, what he's seeing, actually comes from a backlash that was at one point in time very necessary, because we all know it. There were a ton. Every one of us has some great dear franchise to us. For me, it's obviously going to be Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, but be it Star Wars, Star Trek, the Battle Line. I remember back in the Battlestar Galactica, when they made the new Battlestar Galactica, which I want to say was like the late 2000s. A lot of those people were furious over it. Doctor Who, virtually every comic book series on the planet, we have all seen the torches and the pitchforks come out saying, hey guys, y'all are screwing this up. You're ruining it. This is not what it's about. And in many cases, that is the proper reaction. But in others, we have gotten to a point where we are so sensitive about we're so overly sensitive about these IPs and these properties, about things like canon, that any sort of change, evolution, development, retelling, or way to look at it from a different angle is just, I mean, it's gone beyond not okay into the realm of something that's almost like a biblical blasphemy. And he's got a point when it comes there, that nerd culture, look at some of the terminology we use: tourists, normies. And for every group of tourists or normies that we have come into the hobby, you have a select group where people are like, man, that seems pretty cool. I'd like to get into that. And they're just like every one of us the first time we picked up a D20, first time we plugged in a VHS tape of Star Wars, or picked up a Lord of the Rings book, or any of the other books I got back there on the shelf. Didn't know, just got into it, was interested in it. First time we opened that Magic booster pack and saw it. And that's where we started. And we had to learn those things. And we had our own thoughts on them. And we tried to bring our own walk of life into it. And that was us at one point in time. We've gotten to the point where anytime somebody comes in that is not 100,000% up to speed on 50, 60, 70 years of lore and retcons and character backstories, and just deep 14 levels down the iceberg underwater review of the themes and what is meant in these different properties, we slap them with normie, we slap them with tourist, and they get thrown out along with the same people that we don't want in, which are, I don't even think we should call them tourists anymore. We should make a distinction between tourists and invaders. You see, because we have some people that have invaded our hobbies, and a lot of them have some big old corporate bucks. A lot of them have names like Disney, where they have taken these IPs and they didn't say, hey, I want to take a new take on it. Hey, I don't want to move one way or the other. I don't want to find a way to use this medium to push, to let people know about this social thing, or even a reboot. Gattaca, talking about how do we feel about reboots. A reboot can be done well, it can be done terribly. But what we're talking about is people who come in and say, hey, there is a fan base there that is obsessive about this thing. They love Dungeons and Dragons. How can we cram our message into Dungeons and Dragons? How can we turn it from Dungeons and Dragons says something about a social culture that we want, or Star Wars says something about, the society that we want to say, and how do we turn it into a vehicle for driving our culture? It's no longer, it's kind of like safety tools. I always say that safety tools, the problem with them is that they flow from the player to the GM instead of the GM to the player. Same thing here. Instead of it being, I'm going to use sci-fi to highlight something that I want highlighted, It's I'm going to take something that I want to ram down everybody's throats and try and turn sci-fi into a vehicle to inject it into this existing fan base. That difference in that difference in intent is very dangerous. And I think Jorge has a point there that nerd culture has become so obsessively protectionist that we've started throwing the baby out with the bathwater and become stagnant. Now, nerd culture doesn't need to die. It has to stand up and protect. We got to, gatekeeping is good, as they say. Checking out here in the chat real quick. Of course, T-shirted historian here. Yes, push me to 1,000 to the moon and all the other fun internet stuff about meme coins. To the moon, folks. Shove it on up there to 1,000. Let's see if we can beat old Whack Jack over there at Lost Lore. That's what we do. Stand up for content over cheesecake. Push me to 1,000 before Jackie's got a huge head start on me, but I hope he gets to 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, just like I hope T-shirted gets to 100,000 and a million subs and beyond. Let's see here. Isn't nerd culture the reason why these IPs that rely on their fan bases thrive? Yes, in a way. It is indeed a way that they thrive. We do create more. The fandom tends to take these things over and drive them to new heights and give them life. They allow them to sustain their existence through dark times. You look at Star Trek. Star Trek was, in a lot of ways, a failure on TV. It got its life in syndication, and then when the motion, the syndication and those fans kept it alive and kept it on life support, and then the motion picture came out, and then Star Trek became a thing. If you're into anime, Gundam is the same way. Gundam was a vehicle to sell plastic models, and it came out there in the 70s, and it was a flop. I mean, they didn't even finish the original run. But the culture around the Gunpla models and the merchandising around it pushed it. And then in the 80s, it had a massive resurgence when they re-released the original series in a 3-part OVA. And yes, absolutely, 100% nerd culture is what kept that alive. It absolutely did. So this is not this is where he's completely jumped the shark when you talk about old Jorge. When he turns around and says nerd culture needs to die, it's become so inbred and toxic. No, it hasn't. It has an overreaction and an overreactionary culture. Just like anything else in the world, we need to moderate that, and that's on us to moderate. That's on everybody who participates in it to moderate that and to check people when they say, "Hey, look, man, I get that you don't like what they did in this reboot. I get that you don't. Maybe it doesn't fit with what was in your childhood, but this is not a change that necessarily is a problem." Going back to my own stuff, there's a lot of people, a lot of big Tolkienites here who there's no Cricket Hollow, there's no Tom Bombadil, there's elves at Helm's Deep, there's no Scouring of the Shire. All of these things are missing from the Lord of the Rings movie, the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies. It is not by any stretch of the imagination a one-to-one copy of Lord of the Rings. But you get somebody like me who says this is the most faithful adaptation that I've ever seen. They tried to keep all the themes intact. They tried to keep the feel intact. And these things had to be edited out or changed because they don't fit the medium. You already have a movie that's 3.5 hours long. Nobody is going to want to watch an extra hour of footage of them goofing off in Cricket Hollow because that's how the book illustrated that hobbits really didn't have a grasp on just how big the outside world was and how sweeping and how important these things they were involved in were. It was even though Tolkien hated allegory, it was an allegory going back to how did the people who were at home during the war and had never gone to war, had never been on, to the European continent and were living in the English countryside. On the one side, they had something that needed to be preserved in that culture that was kind of isolated, but at the same time, they had the Hollywood movie view, even though it wasn't Hollywood. Sorry, my dog shaking his collar. The Hollywood movie view of what was going on the continent, while he had been to the trenches of the Somme. So you have that it translated well in book, didn't translate well in film. But we shouldn't be gatekeeping that. We shouldn't be raising hell over Tom Bombadil not being in the movies because he doesn't fit well for cinema. Or the Scouring of the Shire that feels like a, to use a video gaming term, a side quest tacked onto the back end. It doesn't really work on the movie screen, and it works fantastically in the novels. On the other hand, we should be kind of furious about the minor changes that he made to Eowyn's character when she killed the Witch King. Made one little change, one tiny minor change that a lot of people don't even catch, where she said that, she is no man to challenge the Witch King. In the book, she says it right up front. She steps up front, the Witch King's there, says, do not stand between the Nazgul and his prey. No man can kill him. They haven't started fighting yet. She is standing over Theoden's body, protecting him so that he cannot be desecrated by this creature. And she pulls her helmet off and says, what stands before you is no man. Basically saying, like, look, dude, step on up. I don't care who you are, I'm gonna whoop that ass. Right? I don't care win or die, live or die, you're gonna have to come through me. This made a strong female character. This made somebody who mattered, who had backbone, and it was a big piece of what Eowyn was. When they put it in the movie, they turned it into a clap line for your nerd chicks out in the, your nerd chick feminists out in the audience, where she's saying it after she's already beaten him. He's down, he's on one knee. Mary's already shoved the sword through the back of his knee and dropped him, and he's on the ground, and she's putting the killing blow in. I am no man, and stabs him. And you get your clap line and everything. It doesn't mean anything then. She's already won. She's throwing the gotcha out at the last minute when she's already up by, she just got the ball back. There's 10 seconds left on the clock. She's just taking a knee. It doesn't mean anything. She's not brave and powerful by revealing that she's going to fight him then. She was brave and powerful because she said, look, you don't think, I don't care what the book says. I don't care what the prophecy says. I'm going to whip that ass. Before, when she's facing the big enemy. That's the kind of thing that we need to push back against in nerd culture. Same thing with Dungeons and Dragons. We need to push back against the change to move it into a slice of life type thing to keep it away from being great adventures. We need to push back against the fact that the game master is treated as some kind of second-rate citizen there for the approval and the amusement of the players, as opposed to somebody who has authority over the world. Let's see here. Old Michael Dale popping in, man. I appreciate $5 up there. Gaming since the 80s and still just a tourist. Nothing like a little bit of self-recognition there, realizing what we are, being some self-awareness. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of cases, we are just the tourists moving through. Hate that I missed Jack McCarthy popping in. Good man there, good man. Savage, nerd culture is just a scapegoat covering a very weak and minority human behavior. It exists in society, not in the niches. Always has, always will. Yes and no. Yes and no. It's, in a way, it's the loud minority. It's the vocal minority, but it pretty much exists everywhere. But I don't call it a scapegoat. I think it might be a misnomer in a way. I think you might be able to say that Jorge is painting with too wide of a brush, because not everybody's there. The vast majority of us, even the vast majority of us who would say that we really are kind of nerds, the same kind of people who were quoting entire Monty Python movies at their D&D table, you still, if you line up 100 of them, you got one guy who's just militant OSR, Simpsons comic book guy, man, right? Who is just there, who's like, no, they never made the D20 in pewter. They only made it in the brass because the metal qualities and a reference to Eldritch Horror version 4.27 issue 4 from 1964. You're going to have that jackass, and then you're going to have two or three, unfortunately, they outnumber them. You're going to have two or three of the people who are, gaming is for everybody. Why do I have 14 different genders on my character sheet? You are stopping me from being who I am in the game if you don't put explicitly what I want on every mod. You have to have rules for all of this. You're going to have those, but that makes up like 3% of the entirety. The other 97% of us are like, dude, just shut up and sell me a D20, or dude, draw a line through M and F and write attack helicopter there for your gender. We don't care. What does it have to do with what does that have to do with going into the caves of chaos? I mean, it's one of those, sir, this is a Wendy's type situations. God of Ka, yeah, you're right there. It's becoming a buzzword, negative term to slap on people for doing things that's not traditional. I think you got that a little backwards, though. What Jorge is saying is that he is slapping this negative term on people who are protecting tradition, as opposed to on people who are challenging it. He just, from what I'm looking at, I'm not as familiar with Jorge as some of the other people out there on X who've given him more eyeballs on his posts and whatnot. But from everything I look at, when I look at what he's saying, it seems to me like he's more of a, we're under siege, the barbarians are at the gates, and what he is saying is that we should just open the gates and all be barbarians. That he is really trying to get, he's really trying to let in more of these people and let them take over. The ones who I said earlier are trying to use what's dear to us as a vehicle to push stuff that we don't care about. That's what you got with like the Disney thing. Disney came in with a social agenda and said, how can we take all these beloved IPs and use them to push this social agenda? And they had no care whatsoever for what it did to those IPs. And in that case, the most virulent and vigilant, the nerds who came out there and shouted them down from the rooftops and won't watch any of their things no matter what, are more or less in the right. Where they get it wrong is when they go into, say, some of the Mandalorian stuff. I mean, I'm just going to have to speak off of things I've heard from people I trust here, not because I'm not a huge Star Wars guy, and for the most part, I was like, yeah, they've ruined it to the point that I'm just not even interested in giving them a chance anymore. But like, for instance, I hear that Rogue One was actually really well done. It's important that you're able to step up and say, hey, this was really well done. All right. It's important for you to be able to say, this adaptation is good. Take the Fallout series from Netflix or from Amazon. It's important to step up and say, hey, yeah, I get it. They're rewriting some of the lore. Maybe it's not 100% where it should be and where we should all like it. But you have to recognize it's not an offensively bad show. It's not a show that they have just completely trashed everything's Fallout's about. A lot of the primary themes that are in the Fallout games are still prevalent in the show, and we should all be pretty happy about that and not jump down its throat over nitpicks. Jumping down its throat over nitpicks means that when we point out something that really matters, for instance, in Mary Poppins, Princess Leia, or the way the New Order and whatnot works in the Star Wars movies, when they decided, instead of just adapting Zahn like they should have to rewrite everything, all the bad stuff that happened there, they don't listen to us for that, because they see something like Fallout and they're like, well, these nerds are just never going to be happy. Nothing is ever going to be good enough. There's never going to be an adaptation that works enough. So we're not going to listen to them. You can't be so radical and so defensive that when you have a point, it gets dismissed. It's the flip side of the same coin of why a lot of us just won't give any of these things a chance anymore, because they've screwed it up so often. We're like, no, you're not getting our money this time. We're not going to pay just to see if you didn't screw it up this time. Let's see here. Jorge isn't generalizing. He's just trying to get off blaming nerds for what he does on a regular basis. He's trying to covertly shut people down that might be a threat to him. That's definitely a possibility. He kind of gives those vibes off. Let's see here. Cybersloth. I think the era of 5e dungeon tubers or D&D tubers is over. The hobby is correcting itself. I would agree with that. And part of the reason I'd agree with it is even a lot of your big dungeon tubers, you see them taking a pivot not only towards indie properties and away from Wizards of the Coast, but you see them taking a hard pivot really towards more OSR games. You have to give some serious credence to Shadow Dark for that. And I think Shadow Dark is a woman-designed game, and that allowed Kelsey to dodge and to get that allowed her to get a lot of additional hype from the tourists and from the invaders, really, from the people who are way more concerned about what's in her pants than the quality of her actual product. She got that boost. She was defended from their nonsense. And then on top of that, she did just about everything right on the marketing side and made a tremendously good game. I think she has started to drag a large portion of that over towards the OSR, and she definitely gets some credit for that. And then when you start looking at people like your Jenny D's and your Professor DMs and stuff like that, which PDM's always been an old school guy. I mean, the guy wrote for Dragon Magazine in the 80s. He ain't a tourist. But what you get to see is I do see a bit of a trend moving back into that era. And then, of course, Wizards of the Coast doesn't help themselves with that, shoot themselves in the foot, because they just find ways to piss off everybody. They're big evil corporations, so they piss off all the commies. They, they used AI art. They sent out Pinkertons. They don't give away everything for free, so they piss off a lot of the hyper lefties. They, it's D&D coffee shop with trans dwarven bakers and Mexican orcs, so they piss off everybody who's remotely conservative, not because, these things exist, because they ram them down your throats. They pull out the wheel. They've just done a great job of pissing off everyone. And there's no personality to them. You don't have like the designers out there talking as much as they used to. So you don't have somebody that they can attach to it to make it really shine and to give them any defense. So I do think that. I do think that the 5e D&D tuber community probably is starting to take a pretty hard downturn. And I think that is kind of a natural correction. See, open the gates and let in all the barbarians, and we will all be barbarians. Sounds suspiciously like something a barbarian would say, and I'm sure that's just a coincidence. Yeah, that's absolutely 100% right. And it's like, man, are you sure? You sound awfully. You sound a whole lot like. Maybe that's what we need. We need our own McCarthy trials. Get our own Red Scare going over here in the D&D world. Which that's kind of my point about nerd culture, is that we got to be careful and not go into the Red Scare mode where everybody who so much is, man, you know what? I think look, Ultra started a 5e campaign. Torches, pitchforks, burn him at the stake. Bring wood and oil. Gotta watch how far we go with that, folks. Let's see here. Sequel trilogy looked like it was starting good. Rian Johnson opened the closet of disappointments. Well, I mean, the new trilogy, the sequel trilogy, it started with A New Hope Redux. I mean, that's basically what it was. It was A New Hope, but the Death Star is bigger. Of course, the J.J. Abrams Star Wars got over, because all he did was take everything out of the original script and kind of tweak it a little bit. But he also killed Han Solo, which was ridiculous and completely ruined his character. There's another prime example. Nerd culture is right to reject what was done to Han Solo in the sequel trilogies. They were right to reject Rey getting everything without having to work for it. Those are things that needed to be protected and needed to be shut down. But them having a complete cow over using a hyperspace starship as a battering ram is a little stupid. And then, yeah, Mary Poppins, Deus Ex Machina, Princess Leia was stupid. But let's not act like it's a massive sin on the order of, say, Poe having the conversation, the stupid callback phone conversation, let me talk to your manager thing with making the Imperial commander or the New Order commander look like a complete buffoon. It ain't on the same level. John, I have to disagree with you. I do not think that the Fallout series is hot garbage story wise. I think there are some places where it's definitely got some holes. I definitely think that it's got some shoring up that it can do, but I definitely would not put it on the order of hot garbage. Hot garbage, there's plenty of hot garbage out there. Rings of Power is lukewarm garbage in a burning dumpster fire. It's such horrible garbage that it can't even get to the point of being hot garbage in a dumpster fire. So can we look at Fallout and say this could be better? Yes, it could absolutely be better. Can we look at Fallout and say there's some things they're missing and that they really need to focus on this? Absolutely. Is it New Vegas? No, it's not New Vegas. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Is it Fallout 2? No, it's not. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Is it Rings of Power? No. So let's realize how bad things are. Yes, I was raised a poor war child. Yes, I am still going to be giving these chats to Aten. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do this and I actually meant to do this at the beginning of the stream. I'll do it closer to the end. Heck, I'll do it right now. So because Harmony couldn't be on, and we're still going to do this back with Harmony next week, I'm just going to do the chats from both of the two streams to go to Aten. So, yeah, absolutely 100% still here for us to support Aten. For those who don't know, Aten over at We Love TTRPGs, he has a great channel. Great. As a matter of fact, it's kind of funny. He's starting to get to the point where he's going to have as many reduxes and redos on safety tools as I do on alignment, because he's got a real bee in his bonnet about it, and I think he's really got the correct view of safety tools. There's a couple of places I disagree with him, but they're not disagreements to the point where we're not really aiming for the same thing. It's just terminology and reasoning and the way we reach the. He's had some struggles and some hard times here, and we want to jump in, and you want to speak about supporting the indies. You want to speak about supporting the people who are a good example of what nerd culture is supposed to be, and really does kind of fit in with everything I've been talking about for the past 40 minutes. Aten is exactly what I'm talking about there. So yes, we are definitely still reaching out to support Aten here. And so yes, New Vegas was a fantastic game. Really was. It needs to be redone. And when I say it needs to be redone, let's just do a thing. We were asked about reboots earlier. What a reboot should be is really more of a remastering. Just remake the series from the beginning. The only thing that I think should be changed is, for instance, if I was going to reboot the Terminator series, I would obviously need to make some modernization changes. One, I need to push it further into the future because we ain't got. Last time I checked, I didn't look outside and see nuclear fireballs and robot skeletons walking around shooting me with plasma rifles. Trust me, as big of a gun nut as I am, if we had plasma rifles, I'd own one. So obviously got to push that back. But cell phones and Google searches, and maybe the Terminator is going to Maybe the Terminator is going to type in Sarah Connor on Facebook and try and find all the Sarah Connors on there. But the overall story and the theme of the characters and stuff should not be changed. And New Vegas definitely needs that. New Vegas needs can we take New Vegas, remake it exactly the way it is, just fix the bugs. And, maybe shore up some of the mechanical stuff on the back end. But yes, John, you're absolutely right. New Vegas is a lovely game. And what the TV series is about to do, the story is absolutely criminal. I don't think so. Let's not cry until we're bit. And that's coming from somebody who generally loves rewrites and reimaginings. What I would say, you generally love rewrites and reimaginings. Give it the chance it deserves. Let it see what it needs to do. Keep in mind, I believe this happens a good deal after New Vegas, so maybe we got a house victory. I've seen some people complain. It's like, it looks like it's the least popular ending that's being used in this. Okay, it's still a canonical ending. It's still a good ending. And who's to say? Maybe it is the least popular, but a lot of times the least popular ending is going to have the least amount of fan lore that you're disappointed by. I mean, a lot of times it's the least explored. And I'm here for the cameos of Joshua Graham and anything else they can kind of cram in there. Let's see here. Problem with the Red Scare is it was based on a lot of rumor and bias. What if you had a way to 100% identify people with a vested interest toxic tendencies in actual fact? Gotta be careful there, because there's a lot of people who think vested interest in toxic tendencies and stuff like that comes down to I do something and I make money off of it. It's like, well, no, I mean, you can absolutely have a passion project that turns into big money. I've seen people who hate Shadow Dark because she makes money off it, or don't trust Shadow Dark as an OSR game because she makes money off of it. I think she put her heart and soul into it, and she did make money, and she is making money off of it. That didn't take anything away from it. But yeah, the Red Scare, the biggest problem with the Red Scare is like everything else. It got turned into, got a lot of political targeting that happened where it was like, what, I could just, we'll just call this person a commie. And it's the same kind of thing that happens with all the witch hunts. For a little bit of story time, very famous story from the Salem witch trials is there was a gentleman, and he actually had already had his wife executed by saying she was a witch. So he ain't exactly the world's best guy. But the way Puritan law worked was if you were executed by the state, they seized all your property and gave it to the town. And this guy was rich. And next thing you know, he's a witch. He's accused of being a witch. However, Puritan law also has a foundation for our legal system that you must be proven guilty. You are innocent until you are proven guilty. And you must enter a plea in order to face a trial. So this guy says, well, they're going to kill me anyway. I'm going to be found guilty as being a witch, regardless of what I say. However, if I never enter a plea, they can't find me guilty, which means when I die, my sons will get my land instead of my neighbors. So they did a thing called impressment. They laid him on the ground, they put a door on top of him, and they started piling boulders and rocks on top of the door to crush him until he would enter a plea so they could have a trial. And famously, his last words were, "More weight, boys." Yep. Went out like a badass, said, "Just keep piling stuff on me until I'm squashed because you ain't getting my stuff." So you got a Red Scare had a lot of that. It kind of derailed it. And that's the thing. That's the important thing when it comes to when we're gatekeeping, when we're defending our hobbies and we're defending these things that are these properties that are cherished by the community and by the, we're major parts of our childhood that we're hoping can help our children come up. When we're defending these things, we need to make sure that we are not turning into the Puritans who have decided to call somebody a witch just so we can take their land. It's a fine line, and you got to use this. And what's more important, and this is the difficult part, you have to call it out when you see the people you agree with do it. You can't sit here and say, well, I agree with this guy 90%, so I'm going to stay in lockstep with him. You got to call him out on the 10%. Let's see here. Let's check out these chats here. Episode 7, Mystery Box, Nothing Burger, and Member Berries. Episode 8, Edgelord's Rage Bait. Yeah, that's pretty much what we're doing. Episode 9, Oh God, What Have We Done? I mean, I said this before. I mean, Disney. When you're handed a money printing machine, hit power, hit print, walk away, come back. Make sure you put more paper in it because it prints money. Don't start cramming stuff into every hole trying to see what you can do to, quote, make it make better money and tear it up. How do you destroy the money making machine? Let's see here. Haven't cared to look, but someone done a decent breakdown. Push 4 or actual play, the new 5.5. There was such failure that no one's touching it after the initial launch drama. Yeah, your usual suspects have tried to kind of fluff it more than trying to push it out there, like your Dungeon Dudes and your Jenny D's. They've tried to. They've really tried to make a silk purse out of that sow's ear. It ain't working. I haven't seen a really good breakdown or review of it. Here's a telling thing about the new Dungeons and Dragons. You can tell that it is objectively a poor design because we skipped right over all the how to plays, how to's, tutorials, book reviews. I use the new D&D system to do stuff. All of those videos, which should have been just easy money for your usual suspects, got skipped over by everyone. And we started straight up with here's 5 ways to improve your D&D 5.5 game. Here's ways to use the new rules with your old stuff. Here's ways to adapt the old stuff to be with 5.5. We immediately jumped into the how do we fix it, which tells us that even their most diehard fans walked in and realized it was broken. Don't waste a cent on anything, WTYC. I can see that. Then, of course, God of Kai, investing in Magic the Gathering because he's in a commander group. I mean, dude, I ain't bought Magic cards since, with some limited exception for some artwork, I haven't bought Magic cards since Invasion, which was, I think, 2002 or 2004 or something like that. I'm sorry, I played Kamigawa, which I think was in 2006. But the simple fact of the matter is Magic has been absolute flaming hot garbage ever since the last Urza's Destiny card rolled off the line. They printed nothing but garbage after Urza's Destiny, for by and large. Massive power creep. And here's the thing. I forgot who really pointed this out and highlighted it, but it is the absolute truth that part of how WotC has killed D&D is that they have adapted the Magic the Gathering business model to it. Basically with 3.5, they're like, how do we make this operate more like Magic the Gathering? And it was, let's do power creep sets. Let's make sure that the new stuff is objectively superior to the old stuff when we roll it out. And let's make sure we're always rolling out new mechanics and that sort of thing to make people need to buy this stuff. If you have one player in your group who really wants to play with Tasha's Cauldron of Broken Everything, now you have to bring the whole thing into the table. And that's what they've done. And then, of course, with 5e, they went radically player focused. They tried to turn their players into the customer as opposed to the GMs. And now they're just turning it into a branding exercise. Let's see here. We should be remaking bad things, not the greatest games of all time like New Vegas, Metal Gear Solid 3. I will go back on Metal Gear Solid 3. I think Metal Gear Solid in general is extremely overrated. It's good. Don't get me wrong. I love Metal Gear, but it's overrated. New Vegas. With New Vegas, I'm gonna say this here, old Cybersloth. The really good stuff, like your New Vegas, When I say it needs to be remade, they need to take it exactly as it is and just update everything so that it runs smoother, has less bugs, but don't you change one letter of dialogue. Okay? Period, end of story. Don't add, don't take away. All right? Just redo. Other than that, you're absolutely correct. We need to find the things that were a good idea with bad execution, and we need to give them good execution. See here, $5. Appreciate it. Or I guess Aten appreciates it. I know he does, but definitely appreciate you pitching into the kitty there to help out. We love TTRPGs. Are you ever safe from consumerism? Well, I mean, yeah, you are safe from consumerism. Don't buy stuff. I mean, there you go. You're safe from it. Don't sell things. Safe from it. Consumerism is nowhere near as big of an issue as the other isms out there. Let's see here. Is bias. I'm actually saying, what if there was an accurate system anyone could use to pick and spot people? You're on a dangerous, slippery slope there. You are on a really dangerous, slippery slope there. That's starting to get into some Minority Report and thought crime type territory, which you got to be careful with. But it would be very useful. I mean, I think it would be very useful, let's call it market data, where if there was some way I could scan the guy who's selling me something and see, he's like, oh, the only thing he really cares about is getting back to his yacht, or he's like, man, I sure hate all these damn nerds. I wish they'd just hurry up and give me their money. I'm only doing this because nobody else. Like, you scan Jenny D's head and you find out that it's like, well, the mermaids kicked me out and I'm not hot enough to be a professional cosplayer, but I'm hot enough to be the Dungeons and Dragons it girl. Man, these simps are so stupid. Scanning her head and finding that out would be super, super useful, but I still think you got a slippery slope there. Sequel trilogy needed more time in the oven. Let's see here. Sequel trilogy needed more time in the oven. Said it about Saunders' Game, and I'll say it for the sequel trilogy. I'm not gonna agree with that. First episode was let's remake A New Hope. It needed an actual script, and then everything else, like if you're baking a turd pie, it's still gonna taste like turds. The new Star Wars, those two Star Wars movies, or the three sequel Star Wars movies, were flawed and badly made from the beginning. They were bad in concept. Everything about them was wrong. And in a lot of cases, it was just, we're getting rid of the extended universe, so let's go read the extended universe and make sure that we make everything the exact opposite of that. So you took something that was probably way more logical and got rid of it. Saunders' Game, actually, I do agree with you on Saunders' Game. I think he did have some pieces there. This is my opinion. So, Stephen, I know you're going to watch this and you're going to turn around and call me a liar saying that I accused you of this. This is my opinion based on what I have seen and based on evidence that I am looking at, and giving you credit for not being that incompetent and lazy that it would take you as long as you said it did. I think that maybe Stephen's game, the Neo TTRPG system, he might have been thinking about it for 20 years or whatever. He may have sat down on the toilet one day in 2005 and said, you know what, I got an idea for a game. I think I like a game. But you didn't start working on that game until here, working on it until like the last 6 months. There's no way. It is not. If you typed one letter a day, you could have created that entire game in the amount of time you're talking about twice over. All right, because even though it was like 1,000 pages, it was only like 200. It was 1,000 pages, but it was like 100 pages a word, which is nothing. And that's when you exclude all the giant line breaks and half-empty pages that have 2 sentences on them and stuff like that. I think there is some stuff there. I said it in my review that I do think that the Skullhorn world actually does have some merit to it. There is some creativity to it. there are some things that could be used there. I think that the base concept of how he wants to use the D100 has some merit to it as well. There is some mechanical merit to it. It's just, you want to talk about needing more time in the oven? Dude, he kind of put a few ingredients out. He hadn't even got all the ingredients. Plus, he's got some ingredients where he was like, well, it says I need semi-sweet chocolate, but mud is brown, so I'll just substitute that instead of buying semi-sweet chocolate. But he ain't even got it stirred up in the mixing bowl yet. It isn't in the oven. It doesn't need more time in the oven. It needs to get mixed. It needs to get poured into the cake pan. It needs to be, the oven needs to be preheated. That's how far behind he is. But Neo TTRPG does have some nuggets of good in there. To the theme of the stream here and the beginning of my rambling, Neo TTRPG is kind of like the nerd culture thing. We all want to bust on it because it's objectively garbage. We really want to trash it because the guy selling it is a jackass. However, we need to be able to look down and say, yeah, there's a couple of things that Steven got right here. There's a couple of things here that are not bad, that are decent. And we need to recognize those when we look at them instead of just running him into the ground. Even if there's very, very little credit due, give the credit that's due. If you want anybody to take you seriously when you're talking about the things that are bad. Let's see here. Yeah, there you go. So sequel trilogy needed a whole new recipe. Neo TTRPG just needed more steps before going into the oven. Yeah, basically. Let's see here. Did you actually delve deeply into Condor's game? I'll have to check that out. I've seen a few poorly formatted pages. Well, Michael, I'm going to tell you this right now, man. I read the entire thing twice, front to back. I read it twice. I made notes. Somewhere around here, I've actually got the printed out printed out copy. So yes, I actually printed it. Now, granted, I did some reformatting for the printing. I was not going to use 1,000 pages, but and this is from a guy who printed it out on an industrial printer for a mortgage company. We print out 1,000-page mortgage packages, so I still wasn't going to waste 1,000 pages on it. But I read it twice. Then I went back and took notes. I went through it. I did everything I could to give his game as fair a review as possible. It's borderline unplayable. God of Ka has done a tremendous amount of work looking into it, trying to readapt it, trying to work it into something workable. And there's nothing bad. Like, it's one of those things where he had a decent idea, and instead of actually working on it, he just slapped his idea up, and it's a lot like a lot of his videos. If you watch Condor's videos, which I do not recommend for a number of reasons, he'll have a 10-minute diatribe where he literally says the same thing over and over again. He'll say something, he'll restate it, then he'll restate it again, and then he'll restate it again. So you'll have the same thing, A, B, C, and D. And then he'll go back to A, and then he'll go to C, and then he'll go to B, and then he'll go to D, and then he'll go back to A. But he's literally saying the same 15 seconds of content over and over for 10 minutes. His game is the exact same way. There's a lot of references to things that don't have page numbers. There's a lot of references to, like, he'll reference things that happen later in the rules, like you're supposed to already know them. He's got some strange callbacks that don't make sense. There's a lot of contradictions in it where literally one thing contradicts the other. One of the big things that stood out to me about it was I was looking at what are functionally his class systems. And one of his classes is his race system. I forgot what he calls them. But I was looking at his actual two different races side by side. And race A was objectively superior to race B. To put it into Dungeons and Dragons terms, that's it, Volcana. His Volcana are his races. Volcana A had like a +2 to strength and a +2 to constitution, a -2 to charisma, +1 to all saves, and 25% additional experience points if you're a fighter class. And then Volcana B had a -2 to strength and a -2 to con and a -2 to charisma and a -25% experience penalty with every class, and started off with half the skill points. And it's like, oh, and he had extra 10 HP. And it was like, you have 10% good, 90% bad versus 75% good, 25% bad. Why would I ever pick this race? Even for like a role-playing purpose. It's like the combat wheelchair. We're level 1 party. We're putting together our people. We got Bob the fighter over here who's got his big sword and can handle himself in a fight. We got Missy the mage over here with her spell book, and sure, she doesn't have a lot of spells, but she can really come in handy. And we have Dan the ranger back here, and he knows how to track everything. And then we're looking over here, and we're like, we can pick Ricky the cleric, who can heal us and can swing his mace and can turn undead, or we can take Jenny the cleric, who's in a wheelchair, who can do the same stuff that Ricky the cleric can do, except for anytime we come across a log, somebody has to go back and pick her up and move her over the top of it, and she can't handle stairs, and she can't climb, and she can't swim, and when we have to run for our lives from the dragon, I guess that's the good thing, is that she gets roasted alive in the back because she's slower than everybody else. Nobody is ever picking the wheelchair guy over the guy who's the same with no wheelchair. You have that. Combat wheelchairs are codified into some of the classes and races of Condor's game, and that is a major issue. However, if you want to take a look at it, I mean, by all means, take a look at it. I mean, I sure as hell wouldn't pay $36 or whatever he wants for the PDF now, but maybe next time he gets desperate and throws it up for free, download it. Let's see. Initial version of the TTRPG back in spring. Yes, I do have to say that. I am speaking of the original version of Neo TTRPG. He did go back and try and do some stuff to fix it. He did go back and try and format it a little better. I mean, a lot of what he did was he just changed a bunch of fonts. He apparently doesn't even know how to make a table in Microsoft Word. So in a lot of cases, he managed to, just with some simple font size and formatting changes, like taking out a couple of spaces or paragraph breaks or stuff, the guy was able to delete like 700 pages from his manuscript. That ought to tell you how badly formatted it was. So yes, he has at least gone and put some work into trying to pull it back. Let's see here. But yeah, I am hoping that God of Ka can turn that into something meaningful and fantastic. All right, guys, we're pushing an hour here, and I'm sure y'all are all sick of listening to me ramble. Everything that I had planned and structured out, of course, involved having Harmony on to bounce off of and to talk about. We were going to talk about nerd culture the whole time. We are going to do that next week on Thursday. So exactly 1 week from today, same bat time, same bat channel. I'm going to sit down with Harmony Ginger. We're going to get her thoughts on the nerd culture discussion. We're going to see how that conversation evolves. We're going to see what comes from it, and we're going to have a good time with it. And I really appreciate you guys for coming out. I appreciate the super chats that came in to dump a little money in the kitty for Aten. He's great. If you've not subscribed to We Love TTRPGs, I really suggest you do, because it is a fantastic channel. If you're not subscribed to me, please do like, share, all that fun stuff. We're going to go through real quick and touch on some of these super chats one more time. We had 3 folks jump up and throw $5 in the kitty. I really appreciate it for doing that. We got good old Michael Dale telling everybody that he's still just a tourist and been gaming since the 80s. You got Savage making sure that we all know that nerd culture is just a scapegoat, and I do think he has a case. I think in the case of the original poster, based on some of the things said here, it does kind of seem like that's probably his method of doing things. That really he's just he's acting in very, very bad faith. But sometimes even when somebody's acting in bad faith, saying something stupid, they, what's the word for it? The blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. And then, of course, are you ever safe from consumerism? I don't know. Considering money makes the world go round, man. As George Carlin once said, and sorry for the crudeness here for you folks, cover your ears if you're sensitive. But as George Carlin once said, if your neighbor gets a vibrator that plays "Oh Come All You Faithful," you want one too. All right, guys. I appreciate everyone coming out and hanging out with us here in the hanging out in the chat and having a good time with us. I appreciate y'all listening to me ramble. Believe you me, it will always be my idea to have a guest on my streams, because I know you don't want to just see me jabbering at the camera the entire time. But I hope to have maybe a end screen and play intro and some other stuff maybe worked out next time. And then of course we'll have Harmony on next week, and we'll run this back and see what we can find out about nerd culture. See if we can get a few more dollars in here for Aten, just to see if we can help out, because he's a great guy. Once again, can't say it enough. Head over We Love TTRPGs and Crypt Talk. Just so y'all know, Crypt Talk is actually his commentary channel. It's where he puts a lot of his, I guess you could say, spicier takes. But definitely worth checking out. And I guess I'll see you guys next time. I appreciate everybody coming out. Have a good one.